He's kissing her, someone. Stop him! A voice shrieked through the glass palace of Nina Ashley's empire. But Fernando Wesley wasn't kissing the billionaire CEO. He was breathing life back into her dying lungs. And for that act of salvation, the world would hunt him like a dog. Call security now. She's not breathing. The shout tore through the glass-walled executive boardroom of Ashcroft Technologies in the heart of Seoul's financial district. Just seconds earlier, Nina Ashley, the 32-year-old billionaire CEO with platinum blonde hair swept into an elegant knot in a wine-red suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary, had been standing at the head of Obsidian conference table, her voice calm and commanding as she outlined the terms of a high-security merger negotiation. Then, mid-sentence, she stopped. Her hand rose slowly to her chest. Her breath caught once, twice, then vanished entirely. The room froze as her knees buckled and her body crumpled to the floor in a heap of expensive fabric and sudden, terrible silence. At first, no one believed it. The 7 executives seated around the table, men and women in Italian suits and Swiss watches, stared in collective shock. Someone whispered, "Is this part of the presentation?" Another murmured, "Oh God, someone call the medics." But not a single person moved. Not one of them stood up. Not one of them rushed to her side. Except one. In the far corner of the room, partially obscured by a marble pillar, stood a man who didn't belong, Fernando Wesley. Tattooed neck barely concealed beneath a black turtleneck, leather gloves on his hands, posture too sharp, too alert, too dangerous to be ordinary security. He had been hired ostensibly as private protection for a visiting executive, but everyone in that room sensed he was something else, something darker. Fernando didn't hesitate. He tore off his jacket and shoved through the cluster of executives, ignoring their startled gasps. "What are you doing?" Someone barked. "You're not authorized," another snapped. "Stay back." But Fernando was already kneeling beside Nina's motionless body. Her lips were turning pale, then faintly blue. "Miss Ashley, can you hear me?" he said, voice low and urgent. He pressed 2 gloved fingers to her neck, searching for a pulse. Nothing. His jaw tightened. He had seen death before too many times, but this was different. This wasn't a rival bleeding out in an alley. This was a woman who had been standing, breathing, alive 30 seconds ago. Fernando tilted her head back, pinched her nose, and leaned down. "He's kissing her!" Someone shrieked. "Get him off her now. He's Mafia. Someone grab him." A briefcase slammed into Fernando's shoulder. Pain exploded down his arm, but he didn't stop. He sealed his mouth over Nina's and breathed once, twice, forcing air into her lungs. Then he locked his hands together over her chest and began compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. A polished leather shoe kicked hard into his ribs. He grunted but kept counting, kept pressing. "You filthy criminal," a voice hissed above him. "Don't you dare touch her." The boardroom erupted into chaos, shouting, panic. Someone grabbed his collar and yanked backward, but Fernando tore himself free, returning immediately to Nina's chest. 15, 16, 17. Another blow landed sharp, brutal, across his back. His vision blurred, but he didn't stop. He had been trained for this. Not in some pristine hospital, but in underground fight clubs and back-alley triage zones where hesitation meant death. If she wasn't breathing, he was her lungs. If her heart had stopped, he was the rhythm. 25, 26, 27. He leaned down again, breathed for her, whispered through clenched teeth, "Don't you dare die like this. Not here. Not now. Breathe." Suddenly, Nina's chest jerked violently. She coughed hard, desperate, and sucked in air like someone dragged from the bottom of the ocean. Her eyelids fluttered, her fingers twitched. She was breathing. Fernando collapsed backward onto his knees, his entire body trembling. His ribs screamed. His shoulder throbbed. Blood trickled from a split near his temple. But she was alive. He had saved her. The executives swarmed Nina now, stumbling over themselves in belated panic. "Miss Ashley, stay with us. Someone get water. Clear the room." The boardroom doors burst open. Paramedics in crisp white uniforms rushed in, equipment clattering. They dropped to Nina's side, checking vitals, stabilizing her neck. One of them glanced back and asked, "Who started CPR?" "I did," Fernando said, voice rough and breathless. He didn't get to say anything more. A tall man in a charcoal suit stepped forward, badge gleaming on his lapel. Chief Operating Officer, Ashcroft Technologies. His face twisted with disgust as he looked down at Fernando, still kneeling on the floor. Blood smeared across his knuckles. "What's your name?" the man demanded. "Fernando Wesley." "And what exactly do you do here, Mr. Wesley?" Fernando met his gaze evenly. "Private security." The COO's lip curled. "You put your mouth on, Miss Ashley." Fernando's jaw tightened. She wasn't breathing. "I'll be reviewing the security footage," the man said coldly, as if Fernando had committed an assault rather than saved a life. "You need to leave. Immediately. Do not return until contacted." Fernando's throat tightened. He glanced down at Nina, now surrounded by paramedics, oxygen mask over her face, eyes still closed. He had just pulled her back from death, and now he was being escorted out like a criminal. No one thanked him. No one even looked at him. Fernando pushed himself to his feet, pain shooting through his ribs. He grabbed his discarded jacket with trembling hands and walked toward the exit, boots heavy against the marble floor. Executives parted like he carried a disease. As the glass doors sealed shut behind him, Fernando had no idea that the moment he left that boardroom, something far more dangerous had already begun. Something that would cost him everything. Before we dive into how a mafia boss and a billionaire's worlds collided in the first place, if you're already hooked by this story of betrayal, survival, and an impossible alliance, hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about heroes and villains. Now, back to 3 weeks earlier. But to understand why Fernando Wesley, a man born into violence, raised in shadows, and crowned king of Seoul's most feared criminal organization, was standing in that boardroom at all, you have to go back 3 weeks. Back to the night a tech billionaire made a deal with the devil. Back to when Nina Ashley first whispered Fernando's name in a smoke-filled room, and said the words that would change both their lives forever. "I need someone the corporate world can't touch." Nina woke to sterile white ceiling tiles and the antiseptic smell of a private hospital suite. Her head felt thick, heavy, like it had been stuffed with cotton. Monitors beeped somewhere to her left. An IV dripped steadily into her arm. She tried to sit up, but her body protested, muscles weak, chest tender. What happened? Voices murmured near the foot of her bed. Familiar voices. Her board of directors. "She's awake," someone said quietly. Within seconds, they surrounded her 6 faces, in expensive suits, expressions carefully arranged into masks of concern. The COO from the boardroom stood closest, his silver cufflinks catching the fluorescent light. "Nina," he said gently, placing a hand on the bed rail. "Thank God. You gave us quite a scare." She blinked, trying to focus. Her throat felt raw. What happened to me?" The executives exchanged glances, brief, loaded, coordinated. "You collapsed during the merger presentation," a woman said softly. "Margaret Chen, head of legal. Your heart stopped." Nina's breath hitched. "Stopped? But you're safe now," the COO continued smoothly. "The paramedics revived you. You're going to be fine." Something flickered at the edge of Nina's memory. A sensation. Warmth pressed against her mouth. Strong hands steadying her head. A voice low, urgent, desperate, whispering words she couldn't quite recall. "Don't die like this." There was. Nina's voice came out hoarse. "Someone helped me. I remember. A man attacked you." The words landed like stones. Nina froze. "What?" Margaret leaned forward, her expression grave. "One of the security personnel. He forced himself on you while you were unconscious. He put his hands on you," the COO added, disgust dripping from his tone. "His mouth. It was inappropriate. Violent." Nina's pulse quickened, monitors beeping faster. "No, that's not." "We stopped him," another executive interrupted. "Pulled him off you before he could do more damage." The room spun. Nina pressed a trembling hand to her forehead, trying to piece together fragments that refused to align. She remembered falling. Darkness closing in. Then, the breath. His breath. A warmth that pulled her back from the edge of oblivion. That wasn't violence. That was... "Where is he?" Nina whispered. "Authorities are handling it," the COO said quickly. "You don't need to worry about him anymore." Across the city, in a dingy interrogation room at Seoul Central Police Station, Fernando sat handcuffed to a metal table. 2 detectives stood across from him, arms crossed, skepticism carved into their faces. They had been questioning him for over an hour. Same questions, same accusations. Then, abruptly, the door opened. A man in a dark suit, no badge, no introduction, whispered something to the senior detective. The detective's expression shifted. He glanced at Fernando, then back at the man, and nodded stiffly. "You're free to go," the detective said flatly. Fernando's eyes narrowed. "Just like that?" No answer. The cuffs came off. His belongings were returned. And within minutes, Fernando was escorted, not processed, not booked out a side exit into the cold Seoul night. A black sedan idled at the curb. The door opened. Fernando climbed in. Sitting in the back seat was Kang Min-jun, his second in command, a man with a sharp jaw, slicked back hair, and eyes like frozen steel. "You're reckless, Wesley," Min-jun said without preamble. Fernando leaned back, ignoring the throbbing pain in his ribs. "She was dying. You exposed yourself in front of the billionaire world." Min-jun's voice was ice. "Cameras, witnesses, executives who'll remember your face. Do you understand what you've done?" Fernando stared out the tinted window. "I saved her life, and now ours is at risk." The car pulled into traffic. Fernando's phone buzzed once, twice, then relentlessly. News alerts flooded the screen. Breaking. Ashcroft Technologies CEO assaulted during boardroom collapse. Mafia-linked security guard accused of attacking billionaire Nina Ashley. Caught on camera. The disturbing moment, a criminal put his hands on Seoul's most powerful woman. Fernando's jaw clenched. The headlines were everywhere. Photographs, grainy, cropped, damning, showed him leaning over Nina's body, his hands on her chest, his mouth near hers. Not one mentioned CPR. Not one mentioned her dying. Min-jun's voice cut through the silence. "The board is spinning this to protect themselves. You're the villain now, Fernando. And the organization." He paused. "Some are calling for your removal." Fernando's gaze snapped to him. "What? You've become a liability." Back in the hospital, Nina sat upright now, ignoring the protests of doctors and board members alike. Her mind churned, replaying fragments, questioning the narrative being fed to her. A man attacked you. But the memory that haunted her wasn't violence. It was desperation. Urgency. Someone fighting to keep her alive. She looked at the COO, at Margaret, at all of them standing around her bed like gatekeepers of truth. And she asked the one question none of them could answer. If he attacked me, why am I still breathing? Nina discharged herself against medical advice 48 hours later. The doctors protested. Her board objected. She ignored them all. By the time her private car pulled up to Ashcroft Technologies' gleaming headquarters, Nina had made exactly one decision. She would see the footage herself. Her assistant met her in the lobby, tablet clutched nervously. "Miss Ashley, you should be resting." "Conference room C," Nina said, striding past her toward the executive elevators. "Security footage from the merger meeting. I want it pulled immediately." The assistant's face paled. "The board already reviewed." "I didn't ask what the board reviewed." Nina's voice was cold steel. "I want the raw footage. Unedited. Every camera angle. Now." 20 minutes later, Nina sat alone in a darkened conference room, the wall-length screen flickering to life. Her head of security stood by the door, hesitant. "Miss Ashley, are you certain you want to play it?" He pressed a button. The footage began. The timestamp read 3 days ago. Nina watched herself at the head of the conference table, poised, confident, mid-sentence. Then her hand rose to her chest. Her knees buckled. She collapsed. The camera captured everything. 7 executives frozen in their seats, mouths open, not one moving. Then a figure in black surged forward from the corner of the frame. Fernando. Nina leaned forward, pulse quickening. He dropped to his knees beside her body, checking her neck for a pulse. His expression caught in the overhead camera's lens wasn't predatory or violent. It was terrified. He tilted her head back, pinched her nose, leaned down and breathed into her mouth. The room erupted around him. An executive swung a briefcase into Fernando's shoulder. He flinched but didn't stop. Another man kicked him hard in the ribs. Fernando gasped, bracing himself over Nina's body, shielding her before returning to compressions. Nina's breath caught. The audio was faint, but she could hear it now, Fernando's voice, ragged and desperate. "Don't die. Not like this. Breathe." He performed CPR with precision. Textbook rhythm. Unwavering focus. Even as fists and feet rained down on him, even as executives screamed for security, Fernando never stopped. Not until Nina's chest jerked. Not until she gasped for air. The moment she began breathing, Fernando collapsed backward, blood streaking from a cut above his temple, bruises blooming across his ribs. He looked utterly shattered but relieved. Then the paramedics arrived, and the executives swarmed. And Fernando was dragged away, hands wrenched behind his back, boots scraping across marble, blood dripping onto the polished floor. The footage cut to black. Nina sat in the darkness, trembling. "He saved me." Her whisper echoed in the silent room. "He saved me. And you lied." The door opened. The COO stepped inside, expression carefully neutral. Nina, I know what this looks like. Get out. He blinked. Excuse me? Nina stood slowly, fury igniting in her chest like wildfire. You told me he attacked me. You told me he was violent. You told me you stopped him. We had to protect the companies. You protected yourselves. Her voice was ice and venom. That man saved my life while your executives beat him bloody, and you repaid him by calling him a criminal. Nina, he is a criminal. His background. I don't care what his background is. Nina's voice cracked through the room. He was the only person in that boardroom who tried to keep me alive. The COO's jaw tightened. We did what we thought. You're fired. Silence. Effective immediately, Nina continued, her voice deadly calm. You and Margaret Chen. Security will escort you out within the hour. The COO stared, stunned. You can't be serious. Try me. By midnight, Nina sat in her penthouse office, city lights sprawling beneath her floor-to-ceiling windows. Her private investigator, a woman she trusted more than her entire board, sat across from her, spreading files across the glass desk. I need everything on Fernando Wesley, Nina said. Real information, not the media spin. The investigator nodded. It won't be pretty. I don't need pretty. I need truth. And his location? Nina's gaze hardened. Find him. The investigator hesitated, then slid her tablet across the desk. You should see this first. Nina glanced down. Headlines filled the screen. Fernando Wesley, Seoul's most dangerous mafia enforcer. Blood money. The criminal empire behind the man who touched Nina Ashley. Exclusive. Wesley's ties to underground arms trafficking exposed. Nina scrolled through article after article, each one more damning than the last. Fabricated quotes, doctored photographs, anonymous sources claiming Fernando ran smuggling rings, ordered executions, terrorized civilians. Most of it was lies. She could see it now, the coordinated smear campaign, the board covering their tracks, the media weaponizing fear. They weren't just protecting themselves, they were destroying him. Nina set the tablet down, her hands steady despite the rage burning through her veins. Find him, she repeated quietly. Before they do. The vote was cast in a basement beneath Seoul's Itaewon district. No windows, no witnesses, no mercy. 12 men sat around a scarred wooden table, smoke curling from cigarettes, faces carved from stone. These were the lieutenants of Fernando Wesley's organization, men who had bled for him, killed for him, built an empire in the shadows under his command. Now they were deciding whether he should die. He exposed us, one of them said, voice flat. Every camera in that building caught his face. Every executive knows what he looks like. The billionaire world is watching. The heat is unbearable, another added. Police are asking questions. Rival syndicates smell weakness. Kang Min-jun sat at the head of the table, expression unreadable. Fernando saved a woman's life. That's not a crime. It is when it threatens our lives. Someone snapped. He's reckless. Always has been. Min-jun's jaw tightened. He built this organization, and now he's tearing it down. The vote was unanimous. 11 voices against 1. Min-jun stared at the table, something cold settling in his chest. Then he stood, buttoned his coat, and walked out into the rain-soaked streets of Seoul. By dawn, the order had been given. Fernando knew something was wrong the moment his phone went silent. No calls, no messages, no check-ins from his network. Radio silence in his world meant one thing: betrayal. He was holed up in a safe house in Yongsan, a cramped apartment above a shuttered convenience store. He had 3 guns, 2 knives, and a first aid kit he'd already torn through trying to wrap his bruised ribs. His phone buzzed once. A text from Minjun, Warehouse District. East Pier. We need to talk. Fernando stared at the message. Minjun never texted. He called. Always. This was a trap, but Fernando went anyway. The ambush came fast. Fernando walked into the warehouse expecting negotiation. Instead, he found 5 men with guns and dead eyes. The first shot shattered a window behind him. Fernando dove left, rolling behind a stack of rusted oil drums as bullets tore through metal and concrete. He returned fire 2 shots, center mass dropping the closest attacker, but there were too many. A blade sliced across his shoulder. Pain exploded white hot. Fernando twisted, drove his elbow into someone's throat, grabbed the knife, and buried it in another man's gut. Then he ran. Blood poured from his shoulder, soaking his shirt. His ribs screamed with every breath. He sprinted through a maze of abandoned shipping containers, boots pounding against cracked asphalt, gunfire echoing behind him. He barely made it over the chain-link fence before his legs gave out. Fernando collapsed into an alley between two derelict warehouses, gasping, vision swimming. He pressed his hand against the gash in his shoulder, trying to slow the bleeding. Betrayed. Minjin had sold him out. His own second in command. Fernando's head fell back against the brick wall, exhaustion dragging him down. Rain began to fall cold, relentless, washing blood into the gutters. In the haze of pain and fever, a memory surfaced. Nina's face, pale, lifeless, lips turning blue. "Don't die," he whispered into the empty night, delirious. "Please, don't die." He didn't know if he was remembering her or begging himself. 200 kilometers away, in her penthouse office, Nina stared at a digital map spread across 3 monitors. Her investigator had traced Fernando's phone signals fragmented, scattered, going dark for hours at a time. The last ping had come from the Yongsan Industrial District, 30 minutes ago. "He's running," the investigator said quietly, "and whoever's chasing him isn't stopping." Nina's fingers tightened around the edge of her desk. "Can you track him?" "Not if his phone stays off. But I pulled surveillance from nearby traffic cameras. There was gunfire reported near the East Pier an hour ago." Nina's blood ran cold. "Send me the location. Miss Ashley, if he's mixed up with..." "Send it. Now." The investigator hesitated, then nodded. Within seconds, coordinates appeared on Nina's phone. Nina stood, grabbing her coat. "Prepare the car." "Where are you going?" "To find him." Her assistant appeared in the doorway, face pale. "Miss Ashley, you need to see this." She handed Nina her phone. An anonymous message glowed on the screen. "Unknown number. He won't survive the night." Nina's heart slammed against her ribs. She looked at the map, the coordinates, the darkened industrial wasteland where Fernando's signal had disappeared, and she made a choice. "Get the car," Nina said, her voice sharp and unyielding. Now, she wasn't losing him. Not again. The warehouse district smelled like rust, decay, and rain. Nina's driver pulled up to the edge of the abandoned pier, headlights cutting through sheets of falling water. She stepped out before the car fully stopped, ignoring her assistant's protests. "Miss Ashley, please, this isn't safe." Nina was already walking. The industrial wasteland stretched before her skeletal cranes, gutted shipping containers, shattered windows reflecting fractured light. Her heels crunched over broken glass and gravel. Rain soaked through her coat within seconds. "Fernando!" she called into the darkness. Nothing. She moved deeper into the maze of warehouses, pulse hammering. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound made her flinch. Then she saw it. A smear of blood across the pavement, dark and glistening in the rain. Nina followed the trail. It led to a narrow alley between 2 corrugated metal buildings. And there, slumped against the brick wall like a discarded puppet, was Fernando. Nina's breath caught. He was barely conscious. One hand pressed against his side where blood seeped between his fingers, staining his black shirt darker. His shoulder was torn open, fabric shredded. Bruises mottled his neck and jaw. Rain streamed down his face, mixing with blood. "Fernando," Nina whispered, dropping to her knees beside him. His head lifted slowly, agonizingly slow, eyes struggling to focus. For a moment, he just stared at her like she was a hallucination. A fever dream conjured by blood loss and exhaustion. Then his cracked lips moved. "Tell me." His voice was barely a rasp. "Did you survive?" Nina's chest shattered. He didn't ask if she was real. Didn't ask why she was here. Didn't ask for help. He asked if she had lived. Even now, bleeding out in an alley, betrayed and hunted, his first thought was whether he had saved her. "Yes," Nina choked out, tears blurring her vision. "I survived. Because of you." Fernando's eyes closed. A faint, broken smile ghosted across his lips. "Good." "No, stay with me." Nina cupped his face, her hands trembling. "Fernando, look at me. Stay awake." His eyes fluttered open again, unfocused. "You shouldn't be here." "I'm exactly where I need to be." She slid her arm around his uninjured side, trying to lift him. He was heavy, solid, muscle and dead weight, but Nina braced herself, adrenaline flooding her veins. "Come on," she urged. "We need to get you out of here." Fernando tried to push her away weakly. "You shouldn't be seen with me." His words slurred. "Dangerous. For you, I don't care." "Nina." "I said I don't care." Her voice cracked with desperation. "You saved my life. Now let me save yours." She hauled him upright, staggering under his weight. Fernando groaned, fresh blood seeping from his wounds. Nina half carried, half-dragged him toward the car, rain pounding against them relentlessly. Her driver rushed forward, eyes wide. "Miss Ashley!" "Open the door. Now." Together, they maneuvered Fernando into the back seat. Nina climbed in beside him, cradling his head in her lap. His breathing was shallow, ragged, blood soaked into her expensive coat, her dress, her hands. She didn't care about any of it. "Drive," Nina commanded. "Private clinic on Gangnam Boulevard. Tell them we're coming." The car lurched forward, tires screeching against wet pavement. Fernando's eyes cracked open again, struggling to focus on her face. "You don't know what I am. I know exactly what you are." Nina's voice was fierce, trembling. "You're the man who refused to let me die. Criminal," he whispered. "Killer. Mafia. I don't care what you've done." Her fingers brushed blood-matted hair from his forehead. "I care that you're alive." Fernando tried to shake his head, but the movement was weak. "Shouldn't. Waste. Your time. You're not a waste." Nina's tears fell freely now, mixing with rain and blood. "You're not." His hand lifted shakily, fingers grazing her wrist. The touch was feather-light, reverent. "Tell me again," he breathed. "Did you survive?" "Yes." Nina's voice broke. "I'm here. I'm alive. Because you saved me." Fernando's eyes closed. His hand fell limp. "Fernando?" Panic seized her. "Fernando!" She pressed her fingers to his neck, searching desperately for a pulse. There, faint, thready, but there, still alive. Barely. The city lights blurred past the rain-streaked windows. Nina held Fernando against her, feeling his labored breathing, his fading warmth. She leaned down, her lips close to his ear, and whispered the promise that would change everything. "I'm not losing you again. Can we just pause for a second?" Fernando was bleeding out, hunted by his own people, and his first question is whether Nina survived. If that hit you in the chest like it hit me, subscribe and become part of a community that values these raw, real moments in storytelling. Comment below. What would you sacrifice for a stranger? Now, let's see if Nina can save the man who saved her. The car raced through the Seoul night, carrying a billionaire and a mafia boss toward an uncertain dawn. Two people who should never have touched, now bound together by blood, betrayal, and a single life-saving breath that had set the world on fire. The private clinic existed in no official records. Tucked behind a luxury hotel in Gangnam, accessible only through an unmarked service entrance, it catered to clients who paid for discretion as much as medical care. Nina had acquired it 2 years ago, a backup plan for emergencies her board could never know about. Tonight, it became Fernando's sanctuary. The doctors asked no questions. They cut away his blood-soaked clothes, stitched the gash in his shoulder, treated the stab wound in his side, wrapped his fractured ribs. Nina stood outside the surgical suite, still wearing her ruined coat, watching through the observation window as they worked to save him. It took 4 hours. When the lead surgeon finally emerged, exhaustion lined his face. He's stable. Lucky to be alive, considering the blood loss. Nina exhaled for what felt like the first time all night. Can I see him? He's sedated. Won't wake for several hours. But yes. Nina sat beside Fernando's bed as dawn broke over Seoul. He looked different, like this vulnerable, stripped of the dangerous edge that clung to him like shadow. Bandages wrapped his shoulder and torso. An IV dripped steadily into his arm. His face, cleaned of blood, revealed sharp features softened by unconsciousness. Nina found herself studying him, the tattoos creeping up his neck, the scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the calloused hands that had breathed life back into her lungs. Who are you? Fernando Wesley. His eyes opened. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Fernando blinked, disoriented, gaze traveling from the sterile white ceiling to the medical equipment to Nina sitting in the chair beside him. You're... His voice was rough, confused. Real. Very real, Nina said softly. Fernando tried to sit up. Pain flared across his face, and he gasped, collapsing back against the pillows. Don't move, Nina ordered, standing. You're stitched together with thread and stubbornness right now. Where am I? Somewhere safe. A private clinic. Off the books. Fernando's jaw tightened. His gaze swept the room, calculating exits, assessing threats, searching for danger even half-conscious. You shouldn't have brought me here. You would have died in that alley. Maybe that would have been better. Nina's eyes flashed. Don't say that. You don't understand. Fernando pushed himself upright despite the pain, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. I need to leave, now. You can barely stand. I'm a liability to you. His voice was hard, desperate. Every second I'm here puts you in danger. Nina stepped closer, blocking his path. You saved my life, and that was my mistake. The words hung between them like broken glass. Nina's expression didn't waver. You don't believe that. Fernando met her gaze, dark eyes burning with something raw and unguarded. For a moment, the mask slipped. She saw the man beneath the mafia boss. Exhausted, hunted, alone. You don't know what I am, he said quietly. Then tell me. Silence. Nina sat back down, folding her hands in her lap. I'm not leaving, and neither are you. Not until you're healed. Nina, you saved my life, she repeated, steel threading through her voice. Now I'm saving yours. We're even. Fernando stared at her, this billionaire CEO, in her blood-stained designer coat, sitting in a clandestine clinic, refusing to abandon a criminal she barely knew. Slowly, he sank back onto the bed. My organization voted to kill me, he said finally, voice hollow. My second in command, the man I trusted most, he set the ambush. They decided I was too exposed, too reckless, a threat to their survival. Nina's chest tightened. Because you saved me. Because I broke cover in front of witnesses who could destroy us. So they tried to destroy you first. Fernando nodded. Nina's mind raced, pieces clicking together. The media smear campaign, the fabricated headlines, her board's lies. It wasn't just corporate self-preservation. It was orchestrated destruction. Someone wants you erased, Nina said slowly. And they're using me to do it. Which is why you need to... No, Nina's voice cut through his protest. I'm not abandoning you. I'm going to find out who's behind this. And I'm going to make them pay. Fernando studied her, this fierce, stubborn woman who should have been terrified of him. Instead, she looked ready to go to war. Something shifted in his chest. Unfamiliar. Dangerous. You're insane, he muttered. Probably. Despite everything, the corner of Fernando's mouth lifted. Almost a smile. Then Nina's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Her blood turned to ice. Unknown number. Return the mafia boss, or you die with him. Below the message was a photograph. Nina and Fernando taken through the clinic window. From outside. Minutes ago. They'd been found. Nina looked up, meeting Fernando's gaze. His expression had gone cold, lethal. Run, he said quietly. Nina stood, jaw set, eyes blazing. No, she said. We fight. The war came from all sides at once. By noon, every major news network in South Korea was running the same story. Heavily edited security footage showing Fernando attacking Nina in the boardroom. The clips were surgical, cutting away the collapse, the CPR, the desperate life-saving measures. What remained looked like assault. Breaking. New footage shows mafia boss forcing himself on unconscious CEO. Ashcroft board releases statement. We stopped him before he could do more harm. International warrants issued for Fernando Wesley's arrest. Nina watched the broadcasts from the clinic's security office, fury coiling tighter with each lie. Her phone rang. Her PR director. Miss Ashley, we need a statement. The media is... I know what the media is doing, Nina said coldly, and I know who's feeding them. The board is trying to protect. The board is trying to protect themselves. I want them investigated. Every communication, every financial transaction, every backroom deal. I want proof. A pause. That could take weeks. Then you have 48 hours. Nina ended the call. Behind her, Fernando stood in the doorway, still pale but upright, bandages visible beneath his black shirt. He'd been watching the news over her shoulder. They're good, he said quietly. I'll give them that. This isn't just your enemies, Nina replied. It's mine too, working together. Fernando's expression darkened. Rival syndicates are circulating fabricated records, claiming I run trafficking rings, launder money through shell corporations, order executions. Half of it is lies. The other half, he paused, exaggerated. And my board is legitimizing it by feeding the narrative. Nina turned to face him. They need you to be the villain, so no one asks why their CEO almost died and not one of them helped. We're fighting a war on two fronts. Then we find allies. The meeting took place in a shuttered restaurant in Itaewon at 3 a.m. Nina arrived, flanked by private security, loyal men she'd vetted personally. Fernando came alone, limping slightly, one hand pressed to his still healing ribs. Inside, 4 men waited in the shadows. Mid-level operators from Fernando's fractured organization, those who hadn't voted for his death. You've got nerve showing your face, one of them said. though his tone held grudging respect. Fernando met his gaze evenly. Minjun betrayed me. Who else voted to kill me? The men exchanged glances. One spoke. Most of the lieutenants. They think you've gone soft. Exposed. That you'll bring the whole operation down. And you? We think they're cowards. The man nodded toward Nina. She's the billionaire you saved? Yes. Then you did the right thing. He slid a folder across the table. This is everything we could gather. Communications between Minjun and the Ashcroft board. Money transfers. Evidence of coordination. Nina opened the folder. Her pulse quickened. Bank records showing payments from Ashcroft Technologies to offshore accounts controlled by Minjun. Encrypted messages arranging the media leaks. Proof of conspiracy. They're working together, Nina whispered. My board paid your lieutenant to eliminate you. Fernando's jaw clenched. 2 birds, 1 stone. I disappear, and Nina's reputation stays intact. Not anymore. Nina looked up, eyes blazing. I'm done playing defense. Back at the clinic, Fernando sat at a laptop, pulling files from encrypted servers, years of buried dirt on Ashcroft's board. Bribes, fraud, offshore tax schemes, every illegal deal they'd swept under corporate carpets. Nina paced beside him, phone pressed to her ear, coordinating with lawyers, investigators, journalists she trusted. I'm done letting people speak for me, Fernando said suddenly. Nina stopped. What? He looked up from the screen. I've spent my whole life in shadows, letting others define who I am, what I've done. His voice was quiet but resolute. Not anymore. If we're doing this, we do it in the light. Nina studied him, this dangerous, damaged man who'd somehow become her unlikely ally. Together, she said. Together. The attack came at dawn. Nina was asleep in the clinic's private suite when the alarm screamed. She jolted awake, heart hammering, as gunfire erupted downstairs. Fernando burst through her door, gun in hand, face grim. They found us. Who? Minjun. More gunshots. Shouting. Glass shattering. Fernando moved to the window, assessing. 3 cars outside. Armed men flooding the entrance. There's a service exit, Nina said, grabbing her phone. East stairwell. No. Fernando's voice was ice. I'm done running. Fernando. The door to the suite exploded inward. Kang Minjun stepped through, gun raised, expression cold as winter. 2 men flanked him. You should have stayed dead, Wesley, Minjun said. Fernando aimed his weapon. You should have stayed loyal. Loyalty doesn't pay the bills. She does. Minjun's gaze flicked to Nina. The board's offering $10 million for proof of your death. Both of you. Then you'll have to earn it. Minjun's finger tightened on the trigger. Nina threw herself forward, slamming into Fernando as the gun fired. The bullet tore through the wall where his head had been. Fernando rolled, returning fire. Minjun dove behind a medical cart. Go! Fernando shouted at Nina. Not without you. Another shot. Fernando grunted, grazed across the arm. He fired back 3 precise shots, dropping one of Minjun's men. Nina grabbed a metal tray, hurled it at the second attacker. It struck his temple. He staggered. Fernando finished him. Minjun emerged from cover, weapon trained on Nina. End of the line. But Fernando was faster. 1 shot. Center mass. Minjun fell, blood spreading across his expensive suit. His gun clattered to the floor. Silence descended. Fernando stood, breathing hard, blood seeping from his arm. Nina rose beside him, trembling but unbroken. Minjun coughed, gurgling. You're still dead. They'll keep coming. Let them, Nina said, her voice steel. We're ready. Minjun's eyes went blank. Fernando lowered his weapon, turning to Nina. You saved me. Again. Nina met his gaze. I told you. We're in this together. Outside, sirens wailed. Their war had just begun. Fernando Wesley walked into Ashcroft Technologies headquarters at precisely 9 a.m., wearing a black suit that concealed his bandages and a .45 caliber pistol holstered beneath his jacket. He didn't hide, didn't sneak. He strode through the marble lobby like he owned it, past security guards whose hands instinctively moved toward their weapons, past receptionists who recognized his face from every news broadcast in the country. By the time he reached the executive floor, alarms were screaming. Fernando kicked open the boardroom door. Inside, 6 members of Ashcroft's board sat frozen around the table, mid-meeting, mid-coffee, mid-conspiracy. The same executives who'd watched Nina collapse, who'd beaten him while he performed CPR, who'd lied to the world. Good morning, Fernando said, closing the door behind him. The lock clicked. The acting COO, a silver-haired man named Richard Moss, stood abruptly. Security. Already handled. Fernando moved to the head of the table, dropping a leather folder onto the polished surface. Sit down. Richard. You can't. Fernando pulled his gun, placing it deliberately beside the folder. Not aimed, just present. Richard sat. You have 30 seconds to leave before we call the police, Margaret Chen said, though her voice wavered. Please do, Fernando replied. I've been wanting to speak with them. About corporate conspiracy, attempted murder, fraud, silence. Fernando opened the folder. Documents spilled across the table, bank statements, encrypted emails, recorded phone calls. You paid Kang Min-jun $10 million to kill me, Fernando said, voice cold and measured. Half up front, half on confirmation of death. The transfers went through 3 offshore accounts, but they all trace back to Ashcroft Holdings. Margaret's face went white. You fabricated evidence, Fernando continued. Leaked, edited footage. Coordinated with rival criminal organizations to destroy my credibility. And you did it all under one premise. Protect the company's reputation. Richard's jaw tightened. You exposed us. You forced yourself on our CEO. I saved her life. Fernando's voice cut like a blade, while you sat there and watched her die. That's not... I have the unedited footage. Every angle, every second. Fernando slid a USB drive across the table. Nina collapsing. You freezing. Me performing CPR while your executives beat me. Want to see it? No one moved. Here's what's going to happen, Fernando said. You're going to confess. To the media. To the authorities. To Nina. You're going to admit you lied. That you paid for my assassination. That you conspired to cover up your own negligence. And if we refuse? Richard asked. Then I release everything. The bribes. The fraud. The offshore accounts. Your careers end. Your freedom ends. Choose. Richard leaned back, calculating. Then he smiled cold, corporate, predatory. You think you've won? You're a criminal, Wesley. A mafia boss. No one will believe you over us. Maybe not. Nina's voice cut through the room. Every head turned. She stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 police detectives and her lead attorney. Her expression was carved from ice. But they'll believe me, Nina said. Richard shot to his feet. Nina, sit down. He sat. Nina walked slowly to the table, her gaze sweeping over each executive with surgical precision. You used my name to destroy the man who saved me. You lied to my face while I was unconscious. You conspired with criminals to commit murder. We were protecting the company, Margaret began. You were protecting yourselves. Nina's voice was venom, and you failed. She nodded to the detectives. Arrest them. Chaos erupted. Richard lunged for the door. A detective blocked him, snapping cuffs around his wrists. Margaret tried to grab her phone, confiscated. Another executive attempted to flee through the side exit already sealed. You can't do this, Richard shouted. We built this company, and I'm taking it back, Nina said coldly. Fernando stood, holstering his weapon. He met Nina's gaze across the chaos, an entire world of understanding passing between them in that moment. She'd chosen him over her empire. The media's downstairs, Nina's attorney said quietly. It's a feeding frenzy. Nina straightened her jacket. Good. Let them in. 20 minutes later, Nina and Fernando stood before a wall of cameras in the lobby. Reporters shouted questions. Microphones thrust forward. Flashbulbs exploded like stars. Nina raised one hand. Silence fell. 3 days ago, I collapsed during a board meeting, she began, voice steady and clear. My heart stopped. I was dying. And while my executives sat frozen, one man, a stranger, risked everything to save me. She gestured to Fernando beside her. His name is Fernando Wesley. And instead of thanking him, my board lied. They called him an attacker. They paid criminals to kill him. They weaponized my near death to protect their own reputations. The cameras went wild. Today, those executives were arrested for conspiracy, attempted murder, and corporate fraud. The evidence is irrefutable, and I want the world to know. Nina turned, meeting Fernando's gaze. The man you hunted saved my life, and I will stand with him. Fernando stepped forward, facing the cameras for the first time without shadows to hide in. I'm not innocent, he said quietly. I've done things I'm not proud of, but I didn't attack Nina Ashley. I saved her, and I'd do it again. The room erupted questions, accusations, demands, but Nina and Fernando stood together, unbroken. Outside, the world held its breath. The international press conference was held in the grand ballroom of Seoul's Shilla Hotel. 200 journalists, 50 cameras, every major news network from Tokyo to New York streaming live. Nina stood at the podium in a sharp ivory suit, composed and unshakable. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the Ashcroft Technologies logo, soon to be replaced by something far more damning. "Thank you for coming," Nina began, her voice carrying across the hushed room. "3 days ago, my board of directors told the world that I was attacked. Today, I'm here to tell you the truth." She pressed a remote. The screen flickered to life. Unedited security footage filled the display, Nina collapsing, executives frozen, Fernando rushing forward. The room watched in absolute silence as he performed CPR, as executives beat him, as he whispered desperately for her to breathe. When Nina gasped back to life, and Fernando collapsed, bloodied and exhausted, a collective intake of breath rippled through the ballroom. The footage ended. "That man saved my life," Nina said quietly, "and my board repaid him by calling him a criminal, by paying assassins, by trying to erase him from existence." She pulled up another slide: bank transfers, emails, recorded calls. These documents prove corporate conspiracy, attempted murder, and systemic corruption. 6 members of my former board are now in custody. Legal proceedings will follow. But this isn't just about corporate abuse. Nina's gaze swept the room. This is about what happens when power protects itself at the expense of truth. When institutions choose reputation over humanity. When the only person brave enough to act is the one society has already condemned. She stepped aside. "I'd like to introduce you to Fernando Wesley." The room erupted, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Fernando walked onto the stage. No shadows, no disguises. Just a man in a black suit with bandages still visible at his collar, carrying the weight of his past but refusing to hide from it. He stood beside Nina, facing the maelstrom. "I'm not here to defend everything I've done," Fernando said, his voice low and steady. "My past speaks for itself. But I didn't attack Nina Ashley. I saved her. And when her board tried to kill me for it, she risked everything to save me in return." He glanced at Nina. Something unspoken passed between them. "I spent my life believing I was defined by violence, by power, by fear. But she showed me something different." He paused. "She showed me that one choice, one moment of courage can change everything." Nina stepped forward, her voice ringing clear. "The man you hunted saved my life, and I will stand with him. Today, tomorrow, against anyone who tries to rewrite the truth." The ballroom exploded. Questions flew like bullets. Accusations, demands. But Nina and Fernando stood together, weathering the storm as partners, not enemies. Behind the scenes, the criminal underworld fractured. News of Fernando's public stand spread through Seoul's shadows like wildfire. Some viewed it as weakness, a mafia boss bowing to corporate legitimacy. They fled, disappearing into rival organizations or foreign territories. But others saw something different. Integrity, honor. A man who chose truth over survival. Within 48 hours, 12 mid-level operators pledged renewed loyalty to Fernando, not out of fear, but respect. They arrived at the safe house Nina had secured, kneeling before him, not as a mafia king, but as a leader who'd proven himself worth following. "The old organization is dead," one of them said. "But if you're building something new, we're with you." Fernando studied them, these men who'd watched his fall and chosen to stand with him in the aftermath. "No more shadows," Fernando said quietly. "We operate in the light. Legitimate businesses. Clean money. Anyone who can't accept that walks away now." No one moved. If this story moved you, if you're sitting there thinking about sacrifice, redemption, and what it means to stand with someone against the world, welcome home. Subscribe and join thousands of others who crave stories that remind us why courage matters. And please, comment below. What moment in this story hit you hardest? Now, let me show you where Fernando and Nina ended up. 3 weeks later, as Seoul settled into uneasy normalcy, Fernando and Nina stood on the rooftop of her penthouse. The city sprawled beneath them, glittering towers and neon lights stretching to the horizon. The Han River snaked through the darkness like liquid silver. Fernando leaned against the railing, still favoring his healing ribs. Nina stood beside him, wrapped in a cashmere coat against the November wind. "I never expected saving you would ruin my life," Fernando murmured. Nina turned to him, moonlight catching in her platinum hair. "Maybe it didn't ruin it," she said softly. "Maybe it rewrote it." Fernando looked at her, this fierce, stubborn billionaire who'd burned down her own empire to protect him, who'd faced cameras and criminals and corruption without flinching. "You could have walked away," he said. Let me disappear. Saved your reputation. And spent the rest of my life knowing I abandoned the man who saved me? Nina shook her head. That's not who I am. Who are you, Nina Ashley? She smiled small, genuine, rare. I'm still figuring that out. But I know this. I'd rather stand beside you and face the world than stand alone and pretend to be safe. Fernando's hand found hers on the railing. Their fingers intertwined, billionaire and mafia boss, two people from opposite worlds, bound together by a single life-saving breath. They'll keep coming, Fernando warned. My enemies, your rivals, the media. It won't be easy. Nothing worth fighting for ever is. Below them, the city hummed with life, dangerous, beautiful, unforgiving. But here, on this rooftop, Fernando and Nina stood together in the quiet. Two souls who'd pulled each other back from the edge of death. Two people who'd chosen truth over survival, courage over comfort, alliance over isolation. Their worlds remained dangerous. Their pasts remained complicated. Their futures remained uncertain. But they would face it all together. And that, Fernando realized as Nina leaned into his shoulder, was enough. The city lights burned on. And for the first time in years, Fernando Wesley felt something he'd forgotten existed. Hope.